"I'll take half of your millions, which includes the estate of your grandma," Bradley declared, grinning smugly, his voice reverberating around the courtroom as though he was revealing the lottery numbers. His tone of certainty made my stomach turn, but I made myself stay composed. At the defendant's table where I sit. Judith Crawford is her name. I am 45 years old. I never thought I'd be sitting here so old. In a Nashville divorce court, Tennessee, observing my 5-time hubby attempts over the years to steal all I'd worked for the rest of my life. On the other side of the room, Bradley sat with his lawyer, appearing to have already won the lotto. His pricey suit, which I'd paid for, naturally, was flawless. His golden hair was pressed and slicked back in the manner in which charmed me. But now I'm feeling ill. Your Honor, Bradley's lawyer went on. My client has the right to half of everything. Assets of the marriage, such as the significant inheritance Mrs. Crawford obtained throughout their marriage. The attorney's suitcase was full of documents, each of which describes how Bradley was going to go with the hard-earned cash of my grandmother. Observed the courtroom audience leaning forward in their chairs, obviously captivated by their presumption that a significant monetary settlement. Most likely, some of them were calculating, pondering about the figures in their minds. How much would Bradley take home? Some reporters had even arrived, attracted through rumors of a multi-million-dollar divorce involving a well-known businesswoman from Nashville. The severe Judge Richardson, in her steel gray hair in the 60 seconds, went over the first documents with an impartial expressiveness. She had been in charge of more than 20 years in family court, and I thought she had witnessed all the tricks in the novel. But I had a feeling she hadn't observed what I was going to disclose. Bradley turned in his chair just enough to give me a quick look, what he most likely believed to be a triumphant grin. The boldness of it. This was the exact thing that made my blood boil. The man who used to bring coffee to me while I slept, he declared his love for me based on my true self, not what I possessed. After 5 years of marriage and everything had been false, the judicial chamber was oppressive because to its paneling made of dark wood and the weight of legal proceedings that are still ongoing. I could hear the far-off noises outside. Traffic in Nashville. Individuals moving about their everyday existence. Whereas mine was being examined in a public setting, tightened my grip on my purse, sensing the envelope that would be altered inside everything. Judge Richardson and Mrs. Crawford spoke straight to me. "Do you have any answer to these assertions?" With my heart racing, I stood slowly, but I'm more determined than ever. I had been waiting for this moment, for the instance in which Bradley's avarice would eventually overtake him. "I think there's something, Your Honor," the court must observe. In retrospect, I ought to have noticed the warning indicators considerably early in our romance. I was swept away by Bradley, on my feet during an especially precarious period of my life, having recently reached 40 and was managing my consultancy business, analytics from Brightville Vale, with a low achievement but little time for love. My closest relative had been my granny, companion for 3 years till her death prior to Bradley's arrival. And I was still mourning her passing when he showed up at Memphis for a business convention. He was pleasant, focused, and appeared to sincere desire to assist with my work. Tiny companies maximize their activities. He would remark, "You're brilliant," while observing I've never reviewed financial reports before. Encountered someone who is numerate manner that you do. At the time, I believed he was taken aback by my intelligence. I now understood that he was figuring out my net worth. The time we spent courting was filled with lavish meals and romantic retreats. Bradley managed sales for a company that pharmaceutical business, but he consistently appeared to be wealthy enough to go on expensive dates. I think it's important to invest in the individual's eye. When I asked, he would respond, "I care about his expenditures." I felt humbled by his generosity and attention, not understanding he had already started to plan his long-term investment plan. After 8 months, Bradley proposed, and I was apprehensive. My grandmother always alerted me to men who moved too quickly. However, Bradley persisted. He maintained that life is too short to wait. "I want you, and you know what I want." He made a detailed proposal in a private quartet, having dinner on a riverboat. Our favorite songs were being played. The ring was gorgeous, most likely more valuable than his yearly pay, but I didn't believe regarding such at the time. My lawyer, Patricia H. Holbrook had demanded a prenuptial arrangement. Any effective businesswoman has to be protected. Undescribed. Although it's not romantic, sensible. I had been uncomfortable bringing it up with Bradley, concerned that he would believe I didn't believe him or that I was more concerned with more money than affection. But I was taken aback by Bradley's response, chuckled, and dismissed it as though it were nothing. Naturally, sweetheart. Whatever makes you cozy. I'm not getting married to you for I'm marrying you for your money, he said. Signed the documents without even reading them, making fun of the idea that love doesn't require print. His easygoing demeanor persuaded me that my concerns were unjustified. It's just a romantic formality, he stated, writing his name with a blossoming, such as pledging to love, respect, and treasure, but with more legalese. I recalled how relieved I was, that he was so sympathetic and eager to reassured me that Patricia had been meticulous in drafting the contract, safeguarding not only my current assets, but any upcoming business or inheritance expansion. The estate of your grandmother will finally reach you, she had reminded. This guarantees that it remains in your family, where it should be. I believed at the time that she was being too cautious. I now saw that she had been completely patient. The actual shock occurred 18 months into our union when I was given the call regarding the estate of my grandmother. She had left me everything, including her home and investments, her assortment of rarities, books, and carefully allocated $2.8 to $8 million handled money. It was much more than I had anticipated, and the inheritance changed my overnight financial condition. In response to the news, Bradley had been telling, but I hadn't noticed the importance at the moment. His eyes had genuinely glowed when I informed him about the cash. He had reiterated $2.8 million as though he was unable to believe it. Judith, we're wealthy. The way he stated that we ought to have been my initial hint. From that point forward, Bradley's spending patterns saw a significant shift. Within 6 months, he quit his job, asserting that he wanted to investigate new possibilities and be available to assist me in achievement. In actuality, he spent my money, as if it were his own personal stipend. He allegedly purchased a high-end vehicle for networking objectives. He made an investment in a friend's eatery without seeking advice. I lost $30,000 when the company failed in a year. He made a booking costly trips, become a member of an elite golf club, and began to dress as he was always rich. Each time he would remind me, when I questioned a buy, that couples and we are partners should have mutual financial trust choices. 6 months ago, the breaking point occurred. When I learned that Bradley had been stating to the members of the country club that the inheritance consisted of family funds that belonged to us both, he had begun identifying oneself as a financier and business owner, casually neglecting to cite the fact that all of his investments were constructed with great care by my granny conserved riches. As I questioned him on his falsehoods, and Bradley grew defensive over his expenditures, and then unkind. You pretend it's some big secret I got married to. He would broke. Everyone is aware that you wanted someone similar to enjoy life. Prior to our meeting, you were merely a solitary workaholic without any social existence. His remarks were profound because they contained a sliver of truth. Felt alone, and Bradley had provided thrill and company into my life. However, I discovered that he had been playing a long term, establishing himself as my rescuer, while methodically preparing to assert everything that I had inherited. The last straw was discovering emails between Bradley and his lawyer talking about a divorce plan. They had been arranging this across several months and timing it to optimize his possible settlement. Bradley had even studied the state of Tennessee, the divorce legislation, seeking methods to make a claim that his lifestyle and emotional support contributions made him eligible for a bigger portion of my resources. At that point, I'd eventually got in touch with Patricia once more and filed for my own divorce. But I declined to allow Bradley to steer the story or the chronology. Should he choose to quarrel over I would give him some of my grandmother's money. However, it would not proceed as he had anticipated. I was now standing in this courtroom, all set to show Bradley and the others precisely what he had earned out of his greed. Reached inside my handbag and took out the manila envelope Patricia possessed, ready for this very moment. There was no sound in the courtroom except for the gentle sound of paper rustling and the far-off hum of air conditioning system. Bradley's assured demeanor wavered, a little as he observed me coming up to the bench of judges. Your Honor, I answered, maintaining a steady tone and evident. I think this has to be reviewed by the court. Paperwork prior to moving forward with any talks about asset division. As Judge Richardson held out her hand, she took the envelope. What kind of document is this? Crawford, Mrs., Your Honor. It's a prenuptial agreement. My husband signed one prior to our 5 years ago. We got married. The shift in the ambiance of the courtroom was quick and electrifying. Bradley's lawyer, Gerald, a slender man Weston, sprung from his seat as if he had, Your Honor, we weren't stung. Informed of any prior agreements. It's quite erratic. Sit down, Judge Richardson ordered, Mr. Weston, breaking the seal on the envelope. I'll look over the paperwork and assess their legitimacy. I went back to my seat while maintaining eye contact, centered on Bradley. His expression had changed, from assured to perplexed to something, getting close to panic in 30 seconds. He was furiously whispering. To his lawyer, pointing to the bench of a judge. I could see bits and pieces of his impassioned speech. She never mentioned. What makes this possible? My lawyer, Patricia Holbrook, stayed absolutely composed next to me. She had been getting ready for this day for months, making certain that every aspect of our datin, the plan was infallible. She murmured to me, Just watch, with a tiny smile. Judge Richardson read extensively, examining each page of the book slowly agreement. The paper was thorough. Patricia had ensured that was 5 years ago. It detailed precisely which obligations and which assets were safeguarded would continue to be distinct, and the majority of crucially, how any inheritance in the future would be dealt with. It seems like a appropriately carried out prenuptial agreement, following a number of minutes of meticulous examination. It's dated 6 weeks before to your wedding, as seen by 2 notaries, both of whom signed parties. Bradley's lawyer appeared he desired to vanish into his seat, discovered that Gerald Weston had submitted this divorce case without performing the necessary due diligence. He had presumed, similar to Bradley, said the union was a simple asset acquisition. Your Honor, Bradley abruptly got to his feet, his voice breaking a little. I must see that document, which I don't recall signing. Whatever that would be. The judge's eyebrows. At Bradley's rage, she rose. Please stay seated, Mr. Crawford, and let your lawyer take care of these proceedings. However, Bradley was now in a downward spiral. Meticulously crafted confidence disintegrating. What is this, Judith? You never told me. This was a legal trap of some sort. Crawford, Mr. The voice of Judge Richardson pierced the judicial system like a whip. You'll either keep quiet or I'll hold. You are in disdain. Your lawyer might ask to see the document via the appropriate channels. Gerald Weston came to the bench holding evident hesitancy. I observed him going over the prenuptial agreement. Confirmation. His face becoming whiter with every page. He went back to his desk and started frantically whispering to Bradley. Incredulous. He was shaking his head. The courtroom audience was now completely involved, feeling that a significant was taking place, and I could hear muted discussions and the scraping of reporters' pencils while attempting to record all of Bradley's public information humiliation. At last, Gerald, Your Honor, spoke to the court, with the particularly not having the confidence it formerly had. The client wants to request a brief recess to go over these documents in greater detail. Judge Richardson examined her carefully. Observe. Did you not act, Mr. Weston? Finding about a possible prenuptial agreements prior to submitting your asset assertions? The lawyer's lack of response was sufficient response. Bradley had had such faith in his approach that he had never even brought up the potential prenuptial agreement to his attorney. Gerald Weston had previously, as much as his client was taken by surprise. You have 10 minutes to go over the judge, Richardson said the material. I must caution you that this seems to be an enforceable contract that greatly affects your client's assertions. I observed during the recess. Bradley gathered with his lawyer in heated discussion close to the courtroom windows. Bradley made motions that were become increasingly agitated and desperate as Gerald clarified the ramifications of the prior to marriage. I could see even from the other side of the room. The very moment Bradley became aware, his scheme had failed miserably. Patricia reviewed her own work throughout that period, or notes, and get ready for what she was aware of. At would be Bradley's final efforts to contest the contract. He will accuse her of duress or deception, silently foreseen. Men such as Bradley constantly place the blame elsewhere when their plans fail. She was correct. As the case resumed, Gerald Weston jumped right into a last-ditch legal defense. Your Honor, according to my client, he was misled regarding the nature of this document, which Mrs. Crawford displayed as a formality for romance, not a thorough asset protection concur. Judge Richardson had a very distinct look. Not impressed. Are you, Mr. Weston? Asserting that your client executed a legal document without actually reading it? My client trusted his wife, Your Honor. To be. He thought she was telling the truth. Regarding the scope of the paper and consequences, I had to hold my mouth in order to avoid chuckling. Bradley had always taken great satisfaction in possessing business acumen, someone who could read circumstances and individuals. His lawyer was now claiming that he was too gullible and trusting to comprehend a binding agreement. The document has a visible label that reads, Agreement Prior to Marriage. Judge Richardson looked over, turning the pages. It contains the usual cautions regarding looking for outside legal advice. Did that's what your client choose to waive? Gerald rummaged through his documents, anxiously. Your Honor, he said, my client waived the right to independent legal advice, and a reviewer examined the document. You mean notary public with your client, in attendance and verifying his identity? Your Honor, indeed. Judge Richardson turned. Her gaze went straight to Bradley. At the time you signed this, Mr. Crawford document, were you coerced into doing so? Did you experience any form of coercion or coercion? Bradley had a crimson face from humiliation and rage. No, your dignity. However, I assumed it was merely paperwork. Judith gave the impression that it didn't issue. Before signing, did you read the document? It? The query lingered in the atmosphere like a sword. Bradley surveyed the courtroom as though trying to find a way out route. The quiet continued until it became uneasy for everyone. In the present, I had a direct question for you, Mr. Crawford. Query. At last, Bradley, I glanced at it. Acknowledged. But according to Judith, it was only a Judge Richardson's statement of formality was a judicial masterpiece. Rejection. The legal document you signed, Mr. Crawford, document after waiving it, but without reading it your entitlement to legal representation. And now you're requesting that this court declare things since you didn't give it any thought. There was utter silence in the courtroom. The reporters themselves had ceased to write. In awe of Bradley's public humiliation, observing gave me a rush of satisfaction. Under the judge's scrutiny, he wriggled. Gerald, Your Honor, made one last endeavor. We might contend that the accord is unacceptable in light of the difference between Mr. Weston and Judge Richardson cut you off. Have you examined the financial statements? This prenuptial agreement includes? Gerald turned the page. Once more, obviously looking for something he had failed to notice. There are a lot of financial revelations here, Your Honor. In fact, Mrs. Crawford supplied them. Thorough records of her possessions, income, as well as anticipated inheritance. Acknowledgments signed by your client verifying that he read and comprehended every piece of financial data. This is among the most comprehensive I've seen prenuptial agreements in my 23 years spent on the bench. Bradley appeared to be on the verge of the golden youngster who had captivated his life's journey, was at last confronting repercussions for his behavior. Judge, after clearing her throat, Richardson started reading straight from the prenuptial agreement. Agreed, her voice clearly across the quiet courtroom. Paragraph A of Section 4. All held assets, either party before getting married, shall continue to be the distinct property of that party. Paragraph B, Section 4. Any party's inheritance will be taken into consideration during the marriage. Distinct attribute, and won't be divided in the event of a divorce. Bradley's face displayed a range of emotions. Different hues, ranging from red to white to green. He tightened his hold on the edge of his table. He had white knuckles. That can't be lawful, he whispered loudly enough for a number of listeners. Section 6. Judge Richardson went on to say that support from the spouse, quote, neither party will be eligible for spousal or alimony assistance from the other, irrespective of the duration of the union or the income inequality. The judge raised his head from the paper. Both of them initialed this part, parties, and observed independently. In a panic, Gerald Weston was taking notes, most likely looking for any potential flaw or technicality. Patricia, however, had been overly meticulous. Years in the past, every possible difficulty had been foreseen and dealt with. I got to my feet, Your Honor. Could I please address the court? Mrs. Crawford, go ahead. When my grandmother's estate passed to me 18 months ago, I spoke with my lawyer regarding whether the inheritance benefited from the prenuptial agreement. Concur. We verified that it was completely addressed in paragraph 4 of section 4. B. The inheritance has been preserved in distinct accounts and has never been mixed with assets from the marriage. This was Bradley's last nail in the coffin. Not just the prenuptial agreement unyielding, but I had adhered to strict cautious about preserving the inheritance. Keep apart. It was impossible for him to. Any part of it can be claimed. Judge Richardson gave a nod of approval. Was there anything you used, Mrs. Crawford, of your inheritance to cover the costs of your marriage or joint acquisitions? Your Honor, no. I kept up my usual money to cover household costs. The inheritance has stayed entirely. Keep apart. Bradley blew up. That isn't. It's true. She purchased items for us. She made the payment. For holidays. Crawford. Mr. The voice of Judge Richardson was freezing. You're not in order. Take a seat down right away. But now Bradley was irrational. The meticulously built facade had fell apart entirely. This is crazy. She and I have been together I provided her with emotional assistance for 5 years. Gave up my career. You resigned from your position. To waste my funds, I muttered. I can't help myself. Judge Richardson cautioned. Mrs. Crawford, Gerald, however, sounded almost amused, as attempting to pull Bradley's jacket to make him take a seat and cease creating worsened, but Bradley was fully breakdown mode, at last revealing his true character, revealing herself. She caught me, Bradley shouted. She gave me the impression that we were partners, and she gave me the impression that money was ours. If you can't, Mr. Crawford, keep your cool, and I'll have the bailiff. Get out of my courtroom, please. The possibility of being physically taken away at last pierced Bradley's anger, heaved his chest with the weight of gasps of rage, but the damage was already done. The entire courtroom had witnessed his genuine personality, the entitled, avaricious man who wed me for my wealth, and then had the gall to pretend to be a victim when his scheme didn't work. Judge Richardson looked over the prenuptial agreement's pages with intentional attention to detail. There was a noticeable sense of tension in the room as everyone awaited her decision. A serene sense of contentment settled over me, myself. Following months of Bradley's lies and deceit, the reality was coming to light at last. According to my examining this prenuptial arrangement, Judge Richardson declared, I'm prepared to provide my asset division. Judge Richardson took her reading away, spectacles, and gave Bradley a direct look, with a look that might have icy fire. This prenuptial agreement, Mr. Crawford, is legitimate, thorough, and compliant with the law binding. You have the right to precisely nothing from the premarital life of your wife, business, inheritance, or assets possessions. Bradley felt the words physically, strikes. His mouth fell open, and he gazed at the judge with utter incredulity. Not a word, he muttered. Judge Richardson confirmed that there was nothing. Additionally, in accordance with Section 7 of this contract, all outstanding debts individually by each party continue to be the accountability of that individual. Mrs. Crawford, do you possess records of bills that your husband alone incurred? Patricia gave me a substantial folder that I gave the bailiff the pass. Yes, Your Honor. The obligations from credit cards, the auto loan, the restaurant's failure investment, as well as country club dues. About $87,000 in total. Bradley's lawyer appeared to want to completely vanish. He believed the case would earn him the large charge had become a total catastrophe. Judge Mr. Crawford Richardson went on. Not just you acquire nothing from this union. However, you are still personally accountable for the $87,000 in debt you accrued throughout the marriage. The courtroom was filled with whispers, and I heard someone whispering behind me. Suppress a chuckle. Bradley had changed from anticipating millions to go bankrupt over the course of half an hour. Your Honor, Bradley said in a hardly audible sounds. This isn't possible. 5 years of marriage must have some value. Judge Richardson had a razor-sharp smile. Sharp. Yes, mister, it does count for something. Crawford. It is considered a costly instruction on how to interpret legal documents prior to signature. The gavel descended with a finality that permeated the like thunder in the courtroom. The court awards Mrs. filed a divorce petition. Crawford. No property will be given away to Mr. Crawford. All personal obligations stay with the person who brought them about. We've adjourned this court. Bradley watched silently in shock as the truth of his predicament dawned on him. Spent 5 years setting himself up for at this time, only to find out that his scheme was doomed from the moment he signed the prenuptial agreement informally. People started filing without reading it, leaving the courtroom, but I stayed there observing Bradley's world while seated surrounding him to crumble. Gerald Weston was obviously already packing his briefcase, eager to get away from this expert shame. I was approached by several reporters for Patricia cut them off in their track with efficiency that has been practiced. Judith, Bradley yelled as I eventually got up to depart. We must discuss this. This isn't finished. I looked at him one last time. Bradley, it ended as soon as you chose to wed me for financial gain instead of accepting me for my true self. Your prenuptial arrangement didn't end badly. Strategy. Your avarice did. His face sagged under the weight of he was struck by his circumstances. No inheritance, having no assets and crippling debt with years of following him. The man who he had finally found his calling in life encountered a circumstance that couldn't be coerced or smooth-talked away. As I approached the doors of the courtroom, Patricia at my side made me feel lighter, more than I had in some months. At last, the horror was over, and Bradley's actual character had been revealed, to be seen by everybody. Justice, it turned out, perhaps accompanied by its own sensation of poetic irony. The life of Bradley disintegrated entirely in the months after our separation. The $87,000 in he filed for bankruptcy within 6 months due to debt. Months, ruining his reputation and creating unable to continue to uphold his way of life. His standing in Nashville's The Commercial World was destroyed when word talked about how he attempted to take his wife's bequest, establishing him as a warning regarding prenuptial agreements, contracts, and the risks associated with marriage for cash. The Nation Club canceled his membership after he was unable to pay his dues, and the high-end vehicle was returned, making him reliant on public transit. His romantic life lost their existence as women in our social networks became aware of his gold-digging plan, alerting one another to the handsome man who thought marriage was an exchange of business. He had to relocate to live with his aging parents take an entry-level sales position in Memphis. Work, his aspirations to subsist on my grandmother's funds were swapped out for the terrible truth of having to start over at age 47, possessing just debt and a ruined repute. I applied some of my protected inheritance to create the Crawford Foundation, offers legal support for women looking for divorce and prenuptial agreements, representation, guaranteeing that other women would not be harmed by financial predators such as Bradley. Reflecting on my path from a woman who trusted me to empowered separation, I came to understand that my grandmother's protection-mindedness, the affluence of my family had spared me from more than just monetary loss. It had prevented me after being utilized for a lifetime by someone who thought my love was just rather than a route to quick cash.